Hello, dear friends. Welcome to this program, Our Moments with God, our moments with the Word of God, our moments with the love, mercy, and compassion of God, our moments also with the holy ones of God, the saints of God. And today particularly, we spend the day or our moments experiencing the forgiveness of God that Jesus proclaimed even as he breathed his last on the cross. Forgive them, Father, for they do not know what they are doing. And before we go further on this Good Friday reflection and a little bit of explanation of the liturgy, I invite you also to please share the videos with others, some of those who may not be able to go to church today, or at least to share the reflections with others, and ask them to subscribe to the channel. Thank you. Yes, today is Good Friday, and many people who do not know about the whole history of the Good Friday and what happens today, many in countries like Hindus and Muslims who do not know about the death of Christ, they wish us happy Good Friday, though it is, yes, in one sense it is Good Friday, so it could be happy because Jesus by his death brought salvation to the world and forgiveness of sins. But let's just first begin what happens on Good Friday. On Holy Thursday yesterday, having established the Eucharist and the sacrament of priesthood and washing the feet of the disciples, finally Jesus is betrayed by Judas and is handed over to the chief priests and also the governor, Pilate. There is this drama going on between the Sanhedrin, the high priest, and the governor, Pilate, etc., all pre-planned mock of a trial. Yes, that's the actual part. But liturgically, in the morning on Good Friday at around 9 o'clock, usually in all the churches there is Stations of the Cross or Way of the Cross. The Way of the Cross is simply what was happening to Jesus that morning after he was finally sentenced to death on the cross. He had to carry his cross. You see that huge cross here. I have come to this church. There is actually bigger than life-size cross and image of Jesus and the three people at the foot of the cross. Some say there were four: Mary, the mother of God, Mary Cleophas, Mary Magdalene, and John, the disciple Jesus loved. But here there are only three figures. Doesn't matter about that. And after that Stations of the Cross at 3 o'clock, the liturgy will begin of actually the death of Jesus Christ on the cross. The prayers will begin and there will be the Passion reading, the whole gospel passage where Jesus' trial, suffering, carrying the cross, and until his last breath on the cross, including those 7 words on the cross that he mentions. And then finally there will be the veneration of the cross, the Holy Cross, which brought salvation to the world. And the service then will end with the Holy Communion service. Of course, in some churches here in Europe, I have noticed they don't have communion service. They say, no, Jesus died on the cross, so today there is no communion. But in many other parts of the world, there is communion service. That depends on the local ordinary or local priest. And then there will be Saturday. So that is the liturgical aspect of what happens today. The main event, of course, is the carrying of the cross, with Jesus falling below the cross 3 times. Women of Jerusalem coming to meet him. Simon the Cyrene is put in service or pushed into service to help him carry his cross. Then Veronica comes and wipes the face of Jesus with her towel, and Jesus meets several people, and finally he is nailed to the cross and hung on the cross. And he hangs there for almost 3 hours, and it is said that at 3 o'clock in the afternoon he breathes his last. That's why the service is at 3 o'clock. Now, one thing is, this is called Good Friday, naturally Good Friday, because through this painful death of Jesus, we receive our salvation. But there are a lot of paradoxes on this. For example, the first paradox is why when we actually observe the death of Jesus, it is called Good Friday. And as I already mentioned to you, that yes, it is good because through this death, our salvation is won by God. So God came down from heaven to identify himself with us. Now, when we say identify with us, he identified with us not just as he was hungry as we are hungry, or he cried at the grave of Lazarus before he raised him up, feeling the human pain that all of us feel at the death of somebody, or when he went to the temple and found that people were selling and buying there, making the house of God as the house of merchandise, he got upset, he got angry. Very human emotion. Then he was also upset with those Pharisees and people who behaved like Pharisees, who thought that they were carrying the whole responsibility of the synagogue or of the community there, but in their own lives they were living far from the actual demands of the Bible. So he was also upset with them. He was also hungry. And then he had friends like, of course, Lazarus, Mary, and Martha, and also John, the disciple whom he loved most. And then he was also pained very much when he was in the Garden of Gethsemane, or even before that. When he sat at the table, he said to his disciples, I am very upset or anguished because one of you is going to betray me. So all these human things were going on in his mind. He was suffering every bit like we suffer. So this is one thing that we need to remember, that he became one like us, not just to bring, yes, of course, to bring the good news of the Lord, but not just for that. But he entered into our sufferings. So he is never far away from us. What we feel, what we go through, whether it be anger, whether it be jealousy, whether it be hunger, whether it be pain, whether it be shame, whether it be fear, or whether it be the prayer to God to take away this cup from me, all those things that we go through, he went through. That is the meaning of how God identified himself with us, mainly to tell us that you are not alone in your sufferings and in your pains, in your rejection, in your betrayals by your friends or relatives or family people, or in your offices. He was betrayed. He knows what it means to be betrayed. He knows what it means to go through pain. This is one very important thing that we learn from Jesus, that suffering is not foreign only to you, that suffering is part of life, and Jesus went through it. But one important thing, or another important thing that we can learn from him, that despite the violence and the humiliation and the suffering, the cruelty that he went through, he never once thought of paying that cruelty and violence back with violence. He or his Father in heaven. Yes, they could have done that easily. They could have forcefully put down the enemies who were against Jesus. No. Jesus showed that violence can be overcome with humility, with surrender of oneself to God's plan and to God's will. These days we see how there are wars going on in the world. The Pope Leo XIV has appealed again and again to people by saying, violence cannot come from God because he himself suffered violence without reacting by violence or getting angry. And the third important thing to learn, despite all the violence and everything that he went through, he only prayed for forgiveness of sins to those people because they do not know what they were doing. What extent of mercy, what extent of understanding for human weakness, what understanding for you and for me, how we fail, how we betray God, how we often fall into sin or into all kinds of sadness or disappointment. He forgives all that. That is one of the major things. And then finally, he will be like all other human beings, taken down from the cross and buried. We shall make a reflection about that tomorrow on Holy Saturday, because there is no liturgical service. But let us take these important examples of the death of Jesus as he hangs on the cross, suffering there for us. We suffer, but let sometimes our sufferings be also for others. Most often we suffer because of our sicknesses, because of our own failures, or because of whatever. But this time, sometimes we can also suffer for others, that we, by doing good to others, we may have to sacrifice some things. That is the invitation that also Jesus makes today from us. And if you like, you may please subscribe to this channel. Thank you.